Hello, welcome to This Week in Stupid. My name's Christian. I'm joined here with my friend A. We're going to be focusing on one stupid thing that the current administration is doing, and this week it is tariffs.
Yeah, hi, I'm A. Today we'll be talking about the horrendous economic policies of this current admin and the fallout from them. So, buckle up to give examples of um, Trump's second admin and how he's damaging our economy right now. I want to zoom in to a conversation that was held between Steve Bannon and Gavin Newsom. You can watch on Gavin Newsom's channel. It's kind of important because you remember Bannon was Trump's chief strategist in his first admin for a few months, like 8 months, I think. So he was booted. But Bannon, who's still very much a Trump guy, lays out kind of the broad idea or like economic policy idea of the current Trump admin. And the policy ideas aren't very sophisticated. Basically, it's just them using tariffs. It's using tariffs pretty blanketly across other countries. Basically, the idea is that because we have trade deficits with other countries, they are quote unquote taking advantage of us, and that it's not just some countries do better in export markets because they can make cheaper goods, which we get benefits from, right? Because if your iPhone is $700 instead of $1,000, that benefits Americans, right? Because you get pretty cool goods at lower costs, and you can have someone who's relatively poor still be able to afford nice things essentially that they wouldn't be able to otherwise without having these like global access to global markets. And what tariffs do is they impose a tax essentially on the countries exporting goods to us. Those goods are they feel taxation, and because they feel that taxation, they want to raise the price of their goods to make up that loss in money. But the raising of those prices is going to make it so that when you go to the grocery store or you buy a car or a device like a phone or AirPods or whatever you're buying, that price will be raised over time, right? Because China manufactures a lot of actually I think it's Taiwan and China both manufacture a lot of Apple products and they export them back to us. So the reason why they are engaging in this is because they want to, as they say, like bring back, and Bannon mentions this a lot in the video, they want to bring back American manufacturing. But what Bannon doesn't say, or maybe he doesn't even know, I doubt he knows, is that America is number 2 in manufacturing. We're behind China. We're number 2 in manufacturing, and the funny thing about our economy is that even though we are number 2 in manufacturing, the U.S. economy is a service economy first and foremost. What that means is the percentage of our GDP, or the majority of our GDP, comes from us engaging or having workers that do service-related jobs instead of manufacturing jobs. And even though we're number 2 in manufacturing, like I said before, we're a service economy because our GDP by percentage is higher with those service jobs. Or sorry, the vast majority of our GDP comes to us in the form of service jobs and not manufacturing jobs. Now, it's not to say that manufacturing isn't a good field or isn't needed. Of course, it's needed, but it's just to say that the goods and services we produce in the economy, the valuation of those goods and services is higher for those service sectors and not for manufacturing. So, by them wanting to basically roll back and try to expand these manufacturing jobs, even though our employment before Trump took office was already 4%, our workforce is already deployed, they're already doing jobs that are producing more GDP than they would otherwise, he still wants to try and tariff other countries so that their goods don't, they make less money, right? Their goods aren't, they're basically, like Steve Bannon says, paying quote unquote a premium to access our markets. What that really does, it drives prices up for Americans because now we can't have access to cheap goods. The idea is that if we do that, then Americans they'll buy American-made goods. But the issue with that is those American-made goods are going to be more expensive. Just in overall, because American labor it costs more for us to pay work in America than in China, or not for us, but
Companies.
Chinese companies to pay more for a worker here than it does in China. Okay, and so what's going to happen is you're going to see higher prices, even if American manufacturing comes back. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And at the end of the day, we have to see which, you know, sectors of our economy or jobs are even going to be built here, right? It could be that you do a tariff on, I don't know, avocados from Mexico, but maybe you just can't get a good industry here for that. And then what happens? What, avocados just cost more money now. So that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And the final point I'll make here before I hand it back to Christian is that, you know, if you if you are tariffing other countries, there is uncertainty in where you should be investing your money at as an investor, okay? And when you buy stock, right, you are buying a share of a company, and that money is used by that company, or is basically money you're investing in that company, and that company uses that money to potentially expand their business, right? But if investors start just, you know, selling their stock off, then that company doesn't have that money anymore. It's not getting a flow of that money anymore. And because of that, they're going to have to make tough decisions on, well, okay, we don't have this investor money now. We might have to downsize. We might not be able to hire people. You might have a hiring freeze. You might have to lay people off, you know. So that doesn't yield a good, well, for Americans, because our unemployment's going to go up then, right? So, yeah, those are a few bad things with this. But and just to mention too, right? Let's say let's say you're an American. Let's say you don't have a stock portfolio. Well, take a second thought on that one. You might. If you have a job with a 401k, that 401k, you probably have shares of stock in that 401k. You most likely do. I know I do. And, you know, if you're an older American, well, guess what? You might not be able to retire now because Trump has almost single-handedly crashed our stock market. So, you know, your unrealized gains are decreasing now, and you probably will go negative. So, yeah, these aren't good things.
And keep in mind, they're saying that for these painful stuff is like long-term beneficial when there's no evidence that indicates that this is going to be a long-term strategy. It's more so what they're doing is just trying to implement these tariffs as harshly as and quickly as possible without thinking about long-term, because there are no plans to bring back manufacturing in the United States. It's just all they've talked about is tariffs. There has been no talking with like companies of bring like manufacturing plants back here. It's just talking about being tariffed and tariffing other countries for what they're trying to import to us. So, as my friend A pointed out, these tariffs are going to be a tax on the consumer because when we buy things from other countries that are made with cheaper, I don't know, just labor, it allows it to be cheaper for us. That means that whatever thing that was being made in another country, we've as a country deemed like that is kind of for to be as crude as possible. That is beneath us. Like that is not something that we decided it is like been a good thing for our citizens to do. So we're like, all right, we can do it over there cheaper, and we can focus more on other industries over here. And prop up industries that will produce more money. Because like, you know, there's money in steel mining, sure, but there's more. Oh, fuck my TV. There's more money in being able to turn that steel into like a steel frame for a car, or even better, and being like, okay, we have the steel frame from another country. We're gonna be the person that like fucking program the car to do all these other things, you know, like the braking and like all the central computing that a car needs these days. We can focus more on that, and we can use that'll be more profitable because we're not having to do all these like what is it? Not menial labor. Is it menial labor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Labor.
Yes. Yeah. We would have to. We can focus more on like the more high end parts of the labor pool of the product part instead of having to be like, okay, we're just gonna mine the steel so that we can do this and we can give it to someone else to do, right? I don't know what there's an economic term for that. I forgot what it is. Is it? Oh, is it just
value
special?
chain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Value
Exactly.
chain. Yeah.
So it's just really dumb to say that we need to be the ones to do all the low end skill instead of just doing what we've been doing, you know, making like hella money, revolutionizing every field that we ever go into.
I want to mention too that when it comes to these tariffs, right? Um, right now we have tariffs on our three biggest trading partners. The biggest one being Canada, second being Mexico, third being China. The list of goods that we get from these countries is pretty vast. So I'll just read off a few things. So from Canada, we get energy and fuel, like petroleum, gas, or well, sorry, refined petroleum. We get vehicles and parts, right? So we get like cars, just the parts in your cars. That not everything. If you have like a car made here in America, it might have parts manufactured in other countries. This is pretty common. So those parts will go up, which means the overall price of the vehicle will most likely go up. And then if we go to like Mexico, once again, automotive, right? So cars, car parts, electronics and machinery, a long list of agricultural products. I already brought up like the idea of like, you know, does it make sense to like tariff Mexico to grow up all these industries? Like, what if you want to build like a industry centered around agriculture? Like, well, do we really like if it's like avocados? Are we really going to be able to build that here in the same way, or does it just make sense to just import those? Some other goods would just be like steel, food product, or where is it food products? But steel, metal products, medical instruments and equipment, plastics. And then from China, I mean, I don't even think I need to really talk on this part because everyone knows a large amount of our goods are made in China. Um,
Even
but
Trump's
yeah,
hats.
yeah, so exactly. So those are going to go up if you're a MAGA. But yeah, no, for like electronics, like mobile phones, computers, computer parts, phone parts, machinery, textiles, toys and games, automotive parts. I mean, the list just goes on. Medical and nautical instruments. Um, and yeah, so if we're putting tariffs on all these countries, all these prices are going to go up. I mean, think about things like I know lumber. I think it's lumber is huge from Canada. Like we're going to start tariffing these countries, or I guess we already are tariffing these countries, and then what the price of a house is going to go up even more. I thought the whole point of this administration was to lower cost of goods. Wasn't that what Trump was saying when he kept talking about like, oh, if you go to the grocery store, prices are so high, I'm going to bring those prices down, right? He kind of campaigned on making things affordable, and he touted tariffs as being this great idea. But a tariff is just a tool, right? It's just to achieve some end. So how about this? I'll give you an example where tariffs make sense. Okay, so this is something that was actually a continuation of a Trump policy in Trump's first admin that Biden inherited, and Biden was criticized by people in his party, in the Democratic Party, but there was a group of people, mainly being people that worked in unions for manufacturing jobs, that did not want this to go away. And with these tariffs it was on aluminum. I believe it was also on like basically stuff for like green energy stuff, right? And the idea here is that okay, like I know there's conflicting ideas about the direction America should go, and if you're a conservative listening to this, you probably think, well, we don't need green energy and blah blah blah. I would highly disagree with that. I'm sure I'll do a video on that someday. But there's a direction that about half the country wants to go in, which is Democrats, which is more towards like green energy renewables, right? And it made sense if you want to develop those industries here in the U.S., right, to tariff some products to grow our industries like EV cars, stuff like that, to grow those industries and then make those industries big here, and then hopefully, if you're competitive, export those products to other countries, right? So you put a tariff on some of these goods, and if you use the tariffs, you do them in a targeted, slow way, you can slowly push out competition internationally, grow up your businesses domestically, and then make them competitive. And I don't think there's necessarily something wrong with that. I think you have to be honest though and say, prices are gonna for these goods are gonna go up, and they do go up. But I don't think that is necessarily a like wholly bad idea. It just depends what you want to do. That's why it's a tool. That's why you should think of econ as a toolbox, right? But tariffs are not going to lower the price of goods. If your tariff lowers the price of goods domestically, I mean, that's not really what a tariff's there to do. It literally won't do that for you if it's working properly.
I'd like to correct my friend here and put it on the record that Trump is making things more affordable. He's making the stock market more affordable for people like you to buy now and then sell when it's high, if it ever
Yeah,
gets high again.
Well, looking at the S&P 500, it looks like a falling knife. Like I want to put money into it, but I'm like, oh, this thing might tumble another,
Yeah.
1,000 points or whatever.
My and I don't know how he did it, but my Nvidia stock was that it was growing, and then just boom, over the course of 2 days, it just went. It's like below $90 right now, or it's like below
Yeah,
100 for sure. Um, so yeah, the
I want to
Trump.
make a. Do you have or did you want to say something? I had another thing. Which one more thing to add?
Oh yeah, go
I
ahead.
just thought of it. So yeah, I want to mention something else too, right? So there's a lot of talk about Trump says something a lot where he says we were a fake economy under Biden. Our economy was poor under Biden. If you look at okay, there when you say something like our economy was poor or our economy was bad, you need to have like a metric, right? A way of measuring things. Like imagine this. Imagine you were a construction worker and I brought a piece of lumber over to you, right? And you say to me, that piece of lumber looks really bad. And I say, well, okay, why? Is it like, I don't know, is it broken in some place? Is it cracked? Is it moldy? And you just say, I don't know, it just looks bad. And I'd say, well, I don't really get your point. How are you measuring this, right? And that's kind of the same thing with the economy is that you need some way of measuring. If you make a statement, you have to prove it's true in some way, right? You need some way of measuring that thing and showing that's true, that your statement's true. And one way you can measure that is, if the price of something is changing over time, we call that inflation, but that is tethered to a lot of goods and services, not just like one thing, right? So the way you would measure that is you'd use the U.S. Consumer Price Index, which you can look at the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics website and check that graph out. It's pretty cool, and you can actually fiddle around with it and like just select certain goods and see how well the price has been changing over time, right? And so the way they do this is they take a hypothetical basket of goods and services, they kind of average them out, and they figure out, okay, if I have this collection of goods and services and the average is changing over time, then and it's the price is changing over time, then that percentage change is going to be kind of your inflation rate. But the way they're measuring it, because you might be saying, well, changing compared to what? Well, it's changing compared to some level, right? So like, yeah. So right now we use the consumer price period the base period from 1982 to 84, and we kind of base off that. We use that to base off like, okay, how is this price changing relative to that? And when Biden was in office, it was high. Between 2022 and 2023, it spiked, but it spiked because of supply chain issues during COVID, right? So if you have supply chain issues, like think of like used cars, right? Everyone was buying up used cars, and new cars also went up in price. But used cars went up in price because people wanted a cheaper vehicle to buy. They buy up used cars. The supply went down. The demand was going up, and so prices, it's just supply and demand. Prices go up, uh, and so those prices were changing over time. And over time they've steadily tried to come down, but it takes time for that to happen. Uh, but when Biden was in his presidency, he had huge amount of inflation between especially 2022 and 2023. But he was able to bring inflation. Not, I mean, when I say, oh well, he himself did it. I understand, the president doesn't control the economy, but that's Trump's position, right? Is that the president, he kept criticizing Biden, oh, Biden's doing this and that to the economy. So I'm just using that same standard here.
Well, let's just keep in
And
mind
so,
that even though Biden indirectly kind of saved the economy from whatever the fuck Trump was doing, Trump is actually like single-handedly ruining our economy.
yes, he is. Yes, I agree to that, of course. And just to back that point up, he's doing that. He's able to do this because he is using his emergency powers to tariff other countries that should be used for national emergencies to basically single-handedly change our economic policy, and it's putting investors, it's putting people in other countries in shock, and so they're putting tariffs on us because we're putting those tariffs on them first. Investors don't know what businesses are going to be profitable, so they pull their money out. He is definitely single-handedly doing that. But
Mhm.
the reason why Biden had high inflation was due to a pandemic, right? That Trump also couldn't fix. That's why, if you remember, the reason why Trump kind of lost the actually didn't kind of he lost the election of Biden was because of his referendum on COVID-19, because it was killing Americans. People were, you know, he was falling apart on national television trying to explain away COVID deaths, stuff like that. But going back to Biden real quick, and going back to like how do you measure the health of the economy? So between 2022 and 2023, inflation spikes. It it peters down past 2023, and then hits a pre-pandemic level, basically late 2024. It takes time, right, for inflation to basically decrease, because you have to do actions to make it go down. So one of those actions that the Federal Reserve can raise interest rates. I think they also do quantitative easing, but they can raise interest rates. By raising interest rates, people are less likely to put their money into investments. And partially what inflation is too much money chasing too few goods, and so over time people start spending less money, and your price of goods will decrease because there's less demand for those goods. And then obviously supply chains kind of coming back to life, and not being disrupted by COVID also greatly helps bring that inflation down. But the whole point of this is just to say that there are ways you can measure the health of the economy. Biden was able to decrease inflation back to pre-pandemic levels. COVID-19 was that recession was the shortest one we've had in the United States history. Sorry, the history of the United States. And employment was also incredibly low. I think when Biden left office, I think it was at high 3%, high threes. Do you remember?
For inflation?
No, for unemployment when
Oh,
Biden left office, wasn't it like
it was like
was it like high?
3.9 or something like that.
Yeah, it was very very low. Your target is usually like 5%, I think, unemployment, or
Mhm.
like below 5%, but like 5% even isn't that terrible.
Yeah.
Um, so just to say that, you know, Trump has never given a good justification as to why the economy was terrible. Now you could say, oh well, it's because we don't have all these, domestic markets. Once again, we're number two in manufacturing. Having a trade deficit isn't necessarily a bad thing. We get a lot out of trade deficits. First off, cheaper goods,
Hmm.
which every American, if you're a regular American, you depend on to have nice things. So, so yeah, you have to give, I think, better reason justification for imposing these, especially blanket tariffs on all these countries, rather than like, oh, we're just going to make things better by doing this, when there doesn't seem to really be a light at the end of the tunnel right now. And even if this was your goal, it's going to take time for these manufacturing jobs, not even manufacturing, but just a lot of these industries to even be grown here. They might not even be competitive here. They might not work here. And the price of goods is still going to be higher. It's just still going to be higher because you cannot pay American workers will not, uh, uh, you cannot pay an American worker as much as you pay a worker in China. You just can't. They won't do it. That's why a lot of people that work in fields picking fruit, working for sub-minimum wages, are usually illegal workers, right? From South America or North America, like places like Mexico, right?
Hmm.
Is those people come here and they do these jobs because no one else is really doing them because there's demand for their labor. But Americans don't want to do them because they don't want to get paid shit. I think it's a pretty easy concept.
It is an easy concept to understand, and hopefully Republicans can understand this without dragging the economy down too much and alienating us from our allies. But with that, we must end this episode of This Week in Stupid with the dumbasses of the week, the American people and their 401ks.